Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Atlantic Council. Thank you for joining us. I'm Fred Kemp, President and CEO of the Atlantic Council. Madam High Representative, a sellout crowd. They're bursting out the doors, and I think this underscores both recognition that we face historic moment in history for Europe, for the transatlantic relationship, long before the November elections, and that people are eager to hear what report you can give us from your trip thus far, and also answer their questions and then my questions as moderator on broader issues in the transatlantic relationship, which we, of course, at the Atlantic Council believe is the cornerstone for all U.S. engagement in the world. At the Atlantic Council, we like to think of ourselves as the home for Europe in Washington, D.C. Thus, I'm honored today to welcome the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy and Vice President of the European Commission, Federica Mogherini. Madam High Representative, thank you for coming to your home away from Europe. We had a fascinating discussion last month at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and I think it was apparent to everybody there at that time that we're facing a particularly important time, and thus I'm very interested to hear your comments and enter in discussion with you. I'm also very pleased to welcome Ambassador Kristen Silverberg, who will more formally introduce our European guest. Ambassador Silverberg currently serves as Managing Director of the Institute of International Finance. As the former U.S. Ambassador to the European Union under George W. Bush, at the end of his term, she brings special insight to this important dialogue. So without further ado, Ambassador Silverberg, the floor is yours.
It is a great honor to be here at the Atlantic Council to introduce Federica Mogherini, the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy and Vice President of the European Commission. As Fred mentioned, Ms. Mogherini is visiting Washington at a time of some tumult and anxiety about the future of the transatlantic relationship, at least in the circles we run in. It will be challenging for even the most determined transatlanticists to prevent our anxieties from overwhelming our aspirations. But I believe that our shared interests and values will prove durable, particularly if we can demonstrate to skeptical voters on both sides of the Atlantic that we can concretely address challenges together. The threat of terrorism, the catastrophe in Syria, the risk that Iran will pursue a patient pathway to a nuclear weapon. Ms. Mogherini addresses these issues with great commitment and skill and seriousness of purpose in her role with the European Union, and we are fortunate to hear from her today. Fred and High Representative, the floor is yours.
Wow, yes, that's a lot of people.
It is a lot of people and not a few cameras. So I
try to behave.
I need not say we're on the record. Madam High Representative, you said your mission for this trip was to identify common ground. We've heard comments from the administration and during the campaign that questioned at times the existence of the European Union, but also we at the Atlantic Council have heard quite the opposite as well in our dealings with people within the administration. After your meetings here in Washington, D.C. over the last 2 days now, and impressive, 7 senators, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, the National Security Advisor Mike Flynn, and others, which I think underscores the importance that the leaders of this administration accord the relationship. But I wasn't in the meetings. And so it would be interesting for us to hear what your takeaways were. What did you hear about that was reassuring? What did you hear that leaves questions? Are you returning to Europe changed in any of your views, more optimistic, less so? I'd love to hear your trip report.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation, and it's really like being home. I was afraid you were going to say my home away from home, and as I'm confused if my home now is Rome or Brussels, that would have been a challenge in itself. But indeed, for me, it is home. And I was just remembering, first time I came to the Atlantic Council, I was still a member of the Italian Parliament in the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, and this was already, back then, my home. Away from Europe, so it's great to be here, and thanks for having me here, and thanks to all of you for coming. I came here with a certain dose of optimism already, so I don't have to change my mind on that. I said I was coming first of all to show that on the European side there is a strong and deep belief in the fact that across the Atlantic, we are friends. Our peoples are friends. They also do a lot of things together, from trade and investments to foreign policy and security work, and also to reach out at an early stage with the new administration, and also with Congress, and that's why so many meetings on the Hill. Because it seems to me that in this moment we need to talk from our European side to the different interlocutors in the US institutions in these days. And I come back from this trip with a positive impression. You were not in the meetings, but I can tell you they were all good, very good. I don't know what the next week will be about, but my meetings were excellent. So what I'm receiving as a message is first of great attention from my interlocutors in Washington to the work of the European Union, and a clear message: we want to continue working together. And this is the same message I'm bringing here. So all good.
So the one name I failed to mention in listing your meetings was Jared Kushner, the special advisor to the president. He also is taking on quite a bit of responsibility for the Middle East. Don't expect you to reveal confidences of private conversations. But in these meetings, did you get a feeling of what priorities would be for the administration or any of the individuals you talked to in the EU relationship if you were tiering them?
Well, first of all, one of the purposes of these meetings were also from my side, to make clear which priorities we have in Europe. And that was, I think, important to do at an early stage, because it seems to me that policies in Washington in this moment are still in the making, and that we have space for defining together at an early stage in a very pragmatic manner in which fields we will have a common approach, or a common interest, or a common priority, and in which other fields or files we might have a different approach, different priorities. Something can be very important for us and less important here, or on some other issues we might disagree. I have the impression that before I said all good, meaning all meetings were good and all messages were good, but I would not pretend we do not have different views on some issues. So what I can tell you is where European priorities are, and where I see where common ground can be found, and maybe some other issues where we have different approaches. I see, first of all, common ground in the strong intention to work together. If I have to believe in all the messages I've heard during my meetings, that's clear to me. Continued cooperation, strong EU cooperation and work. Understanding well, I think, and I hope I contributed to this understanding in these 2 days, that the European Union is not an institution, it's 28 member states. Second, some common ground on some of our priorities. There are common priorities. The fight against terrorism, Ambassador was mentioning this, solving some of the crises we have around us and globally, the situation in the east of Ukraine, Syria, terrorism, not only in the Middle East, but also spreading in some parts of Africa. We have for sure work that we can do together there. We have on the European side top priorities where we might find some different views across the Atlantic today. How we face the Middle East peace process. I think there we share the priority. We might have some differences on how we face them. And as you see, I'm very open and not hiding any of the difficulties. And we might have some other issues where we see as Europeans we need to put these issues as a priority, and maybe here not so much. Climate change, multilateralism, free trade, free and fair trade, and an international global system of trade. Maybe some human rights issues. But it's not for me to define the American agenda that I understand is still in the making. What I can do is to bring the European agenda, put it on the table, and in a very pragmatic, open, constructive, friendly, maybe transactional approach, see where we can work together, where we might have differences, and how we make the most out of this partnership. Among the things on which we might have different views, there's the global approach to migration and refugees. And again, the list could continue, but I see space for common ground. I see space for common work. And I understand that many policies are still in the making. I forgot to mention one very important thing on which I found some common ground, which is the nuclear deal with Iran, JCPOA. For me, that was a priority, that is a priority to preserve the deal, have a strong US commitment to its full implementation, which means strict, and implementation is either in place or not. So 100%, and on this I come back with some reassurances.
No, I saw you tweet that earlier.
I also tweet.
Earlier. Yeah.
And I also do it myself.
So even more room for common ground.
Definitely so.
Even
if I'm considering starting to make my my team check my tweets before I send them out.
Well, I won't comment on that. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the Iran conversation. What did you hear there that you found reassuring?
I've heard from all my interlocutors the intention to make sure that the deal is 100% implemented. This requires all parties, which means mainly Iran on its nuclear commitments, but also the international community, to fulfill the commitments that are agreed in the agreement, in the deal. And for me, personally, this is a very important thing to do because I still have a special institutional role in chairing the Joint Commission that overviews the implementation of the deal. That is not a bilateral deal. That is now belonging to the international community through the UN Security Council resolution that endorses it. And as European, it was important for me to pass here the message that I think was clearly understood, that it's key for our security, as we are in the same region with Iran, to see the deal implemented as it is now, because 1 year after the implementation day, we have had 4 IAEA reports on its full implementation on the nuclear-related commitments of Iran. This is important for Europe. This is essential for Europe. Then there are other issues where we share concerns with the US administration and with many others in the world that are not related to the nuclear program of Iran, not related to the nuclear agreement. The role of Iran in some regional conflicts, starting from Yemen or Syria, support to terrorist activities, the missile defense, the missile tests, and things like that. I would add, as European human rights and that penalty. I know this is a different story maybe here, but for us it's really an important point. And as Europeans, we do have our sanctions in place for non-nuclear related issues with Iran. And in some cases, our sanctions are tougher than the American ones. So we also are concerned about some other things. But what is clear to us as Europeans altogether, and what I also conveyed here in my meetings, is that Europe feels an interest and a responsibility to engage with Iran, especially as long as the nuclear deal is fully implemented on their side, on their nuclear commitments. We will continue to engage with Iran, being it on economic relations, being it in political dialogue, being it in the sectorial dialogues and cooperations we have started. I know this is not the US policy, but this is the European policy, and this will continue. So we have on one side the full implementation of the JCPOA, where I have seen here a certain degree of commitment to stick to that. Our common concern on non-nuclear related issues, on the role of Iran, and where we have different policies, but that was the case also with the previous administration. The European way, has always been the case with Iran, is one of engagement. And that will continue. And I think it's very important that Iranians, the Iranian citizens, hear this from Europe in these days.
Thank you for that. On Russia, we've heard different statements at different times from the administration, from the president. Administration most recently signaled that U.S. sanctions against Russia would remain in place. On the other hand, there seems to be a desire to significantly improve the relationship with Russia. To the extent you can, how did this tell us? How did this come up in your conversations, and where do you see potential commonalities and differences on the issue of Russia, and particularly Ukraine?
You know, if I can, it's quite weird. If I can just have a reflection, thinking loud. It's the first time I come to Washington, and rather than being questioned on the EU positions on Russia or Syria or whatever, I'm questioned about the US positions. It's okay.
Yes, could you
It's
please?
Okay. I'll try my best.
Could you please tell us what the US position is?
I'm not sure I can. No, on some things I do. I'm not sure it's appropriate for me to be the spokesperson. But that's an interesting experience. It's also the first time that that main focus of my visit to Washington is bilateral relations rather than some of the crises we have around us. And this is telling us the new era we're entering in. On Russia, first of all, for Europeans, it's clear we have a two-track policy with Russia. There are files on which we work very well with Russia. The Iran deal was a perfect example of that. The Middle East peace process, Israel-Palestine is another example where the Europeans and the Russians work well together within the quartet. We have similar views. Other issues where we work a lot and well together. So this perception that Europe doesn't talk to Russia is a misperception. And by the way, a couple of years ago, I would have been asked if we were not talking too much to the Russians. So things change in an interesting manner. We have a strong policy and principled policy when it comes to Ukraine. This is very serious to us, not only for the situation in the east of Ukraine itself and in Crimea, but also because for us, Europeans, it's essential to understand each other, especially across the Atlantic, on the basic, vital principle that you do not change borders by force. And this for us is a must of our cooperation. Across the Atlantic, this has never been put into question. And I believe this is related not only to the principles of international law, which is, but also it's a matter of security for Europe. And I believe that many of my European fellow citizens in the east of our continent are potentially a bit nervous about question marks that could be put here on this approach. Also on this, my meetings were positive, and in particular, we agreed that as long as the Minsk agreements are not fully implemented, sanctions will remain in place. But I don't know if this is going to be the consolidated policy. And as you were not in my meetings, I was not in the Oval Office when President Trump called President Putin. But for us, this is an essential point. I believe that this is not an essential point only for Europeans. I think that in Congress, this is an essential point as well.
And if there is a thaw of some sort in relationships between the U.S. and Russia, which is a possibility even if sanctions should remain in place, do you foresee that EU members will have the resolve to stay firm on sanctions under the current set of circumstances where Minsk hasn't been implemented and Crimea is still occupied?
I think Europeans will continue to be united on that. I don't know if Americans will be united on that, but Europeans will. For us, I want to be clear also on this. For us, the sanctions are not a policy in itself. It's not something we take particular pleasure in having. For us, it's an instrument to put pressure and achieve the result. And for us, the result is not keeping the sanctions. For us, the result is solving the conflict in Ukraine. So we also discussed, especially with Secretary Tillerson, how we can better support or help the full implementation of the Minsk agreements. And this is perfectly fine, because the real objective is this: to achieve peace in east of Ukraine, respect of international law, and also in Crimea. So again, the European position is clear on this. I'm confident it will continue to be clear in unity, because all those that over years have bet on Europeans to divide themselves on this have been wrong, and I think this will continue to be the case. But I cannot answer for the US. I can say I was receiving reassuring messages, but I don't know if there will be divisions in the US on this. I hope not.
Thank you for that. I'm going to ask one or two more questions and then go to the audience. You've said that the EU is ready for a transactional way of working in the United States, your words in the past and also today. I guess at the Atlantic Council, the notion of a transactional relationship for the transatlantic partners would seem a step backwards. So do you think that this is sufficient? And what do you mean when you say a transactional way of working with the United States?
You know, I have the feeling that this is a moment in history where we have to, where we're called to avoid giving it for granted that people understand the added value of our friendship, which is sad, I agree. I prefer to have a partnership, a friendship based on this automatic reflect we've had in the last years of turning to each other and agreeing things to do naturally. But if there is the need to recall the need for a friendship to be in place, the added value of the European Union to America, then we're ready to do so. And I will just mention a couple of very basic things that here in the Atlantic Council I think are quite self-evident, but maybe we need to stress them again. One is the economic relation we have. 80% of foreign investment in the US come from Europe, come from the European Union. 80%, not 1880. And I think we're bringing a couple of million more jobs in America with European investments. And I think you can not find many states in the United States that are not having 300, 400,000 jobs created in Europe, from Europe, in America. Is this a transactional way of putting things? I don't know.
Yeah.
But we need each other. And it's not Europe that needs America only. It's America that needs Europe. And we better recognize that to have a serious conversation. The other thing is security. And even if the European Union is not NATO, and we do not, we cannot make the two organizations overlap, there is a big elephant in the room that is the investment in our common security. And in Europe, we've started well before the November elections last summer to work very seriously on strengthening the European defense within the European Union. And to me, it was very strange because I spent months from July to October, November even, reassuring Washington and the other side of Brussels, which means NATO headquarters, that this was not to undermine NATO, not in competition with NATO, but to strengthen NATO. And now I'm passing these other months explaining that it's good to strengthen NATO, and this is going to be the European way. When I put this in the transactional box because you know that perfectly well. Article 5 was invoked only once, and that was after 9/11. And Europeans have carried a burden for our common commitment to security in the world, through NATO, but also through other means. The European Union is a security provider, is also a hard power, even if this is not perceived too much here. We have 16 military missions and operations in the world. We are training military forces in parts of Africa where the terrorist threat is serious and present. We are operating off the coast of Horn of Africa against piracy that has basically disappeared from the region. We are in the Mediterranean Sea, dismantling the business of smugglers and traffickers of people, but also saving lives. We are also a military power, and if people are serious on the need to have European member states investing not only more but also better on defense, this can be done with the support of the European Union. I give you an example. I think I mentioned that to you in Davos a couple of weeks ago. In Europe, we invest 50% of what is invested in America for defense. But the output of our European investments on defense is 15%. Why? Because we are not working together at the economy of scale that is needed. So here comes the added value of the European Union. We are proposing plans and funds to incentivize member states of the European Union to work together in cooperation on developing capabilities, investing in research and innovation, strengthening their defense. This can happen with the support of the European Union. Without that, single member states will continue to invest in a very fragmented manner, and the burden sharing of our common security across the Atlantic will continue to be as it is. So 2 examples of how transactional we can be.
So not just getting the NATO target of 2% for all the NATO members, but actually spending the money better via EU plans. One last question for me, and then I'll turn to the audience. You were talking about Europe needing the US needing Europe. The impression from here, and also among many of my European friends there, is that the EU is facing potentially existential challenges. You have Brexit, you have challenges from the East, challenges from the South, centrifugal political challenges, and then the elections this year, France, Holland, Germany, and so on. How do you view the state of Europe from that standpoint? How serious do you think these challenges are? And even more importantly, what is the U.S. contribution, or what could the U.S. contribution or Trump administration contribution be at this point in this scenario?
For good or for bad?
You can go both ways. No, let's look at a worst case scenario, best case scenario.
You know, I will surprise you. I think the state of our union is strong and good. I have recently said that the European Union and Europe in general is a little bit like a 16-year-old beautiful girl that looks at herself in the mirror and finds herself ugly, and life is awful, and everything is going wrong. While we're turning 60 this year. We're going to celebrate the 60th anniversary of the Treaty of Rome in the end of March. The previous US administration used to tell us very often that Europe should believe in itself as much as America believed in Europe. And I think this sentence is worth keeping in our memory very strongly, at least in Europe, because we are much more powerful, much stronger than sometimes we perceive ourselves to be. And you know, you speak about a European existential crisis. Take Brexit. 8 months after the referendum, the UK has not even formally notified their willingness to start negotiations. So for sure the decision is taken, but they don't seem particularly in a hurry to get out. I think this is telling a lot. And by the way, I take this chance to stress the fact that so not only the UK is still a member state, but it will continue to be the case for another couple of years minimum. So this has to be taken into consideration, because I chair 3 formations of the European Council: foreign ministers, defense ministers, development ministers. We're still 28 around the table, and we will continue to be 28 around the table. So not only I do not see others following, but at the moment, I have still 28 foreign ministers to deal with. And we still take decisions by consensus. And an important thing to stress, not because we are a prison, but because member states see this as their own interest. As long as you're a member state, trade agreements are negotiated by the European Union. Not one single member state, including the UK for at least a couple of years to go, can negotiate bilateral trade agreements with third parties. I think this is important to state here, as I understand our British friends did also publicly. I don't know if privately, but for sure it's the case. This is continuing to be the case. Yeah. So in the transactional approach, there's also the trade part of the relevance of the European Union being the first market in the world, also for American goods, and the second economic power for GDP in the world. There's a bit of a discussion on which one is the first, but I leave it to you.
And the U.S. contribution, worst case, what you would hope, best case and worst case?
I only have one case, because we would not accept, no, sorry, but no interference. No interference. We do not interfere on US domestic politics, And there's plenty of US domestic politics these days. It's not for me to comment on that. Not on political decisions, not on decisions of the court. That's for the US. It's democracy, it's a great democracy, strong institutions, strong people, great people. It's not for me or for any other European to comment on domestic political choices or decisions in the US. The same goes with Europe. No interference. By the way, we don't see elections as a major challenge. Elections are part of our democratic life, and Europeans can take their own political decisions wisely. I have full confidence in the European democracies. And I have the impression that there's quite enough here to do, and maybe the free time to dedicate to European politics is not that much. Maybe America first means also that you have to deal with America first.
That seems a little bit of a minimalist approach if you think of America's role in the post-World War II history of Europe. But you would be satisfied with that, let Europe go forward the way it will go forward. You don't really need American assistance and help at this point.
I'm saying no interference because I'm hearing and seeing messages from time to time, not in my meetings here, and this reassures me very, very much. But I'm hearing rumors around or seeing people around inviting Europeans to do one thing or the other, inviting member states to do one thing or the other. And I think we have to make clear that there's a certain European pride. We are grateful to America. I'm Italian. And I stop here. It's clear, no? It's clear. It's clear. We've built our freedom, our democracies, our economies together. But we're grown up. We're turning 60 this year as a union. We are a global power. We are responsible for ourselves. I wish we could have a friendship that continues to be a natural friendship in which we can help each other strengthen our economies, our democracies. Democracy is always in the making. It's never perfect. That's the best case scenario, that's clear. We've never had such a strong and fruitful transatlantic partnership as we've had in this 2.5 years I've been in office. That has been ideal. For me and for us all Europeans, this can continue and we would be perfectly happy with that. But as I hear sometimes voices saying, you know, the European Union is not necessarily a good idea, inviting to dismantle what we have managed to build, and that has brought us not only peace but also economic strength.
I hear you. As with the physician, you start by doing no harm.
So yes, yes. Then if we can do much better than this, I'm only happy because this is the way in which we worked in these last 2.5 years.
Excellent.
For me,
questions? I see one here and then here. So please.
Thank you, Madam High Representative. I'm Ali Dad Mafi Nizam of the West Asia Council here in Washington. My question has to do with whether, in engaging your American interlocutors, had a chance to discuss issues of migration, diversity, and pluralism across the Atlantic. Thank you. Including refugees.
You did hint in your opening comments that there may be differences of opinion on migration and refugees.
Yeah. Again, I would not, it's not for me to comment on decisions that are taken here, and especially in a moment when we see that there is some institutional divergence around them. I do not comment on court decisions or in my own country, imagine here. That's a good rule for any politician, I believe. So it's for the United States to find their own way on how to manage migration. What I can say is the European way, and we struggled quite a lot to find our own way, because last year, the year before, was quite a painful experience. And again, being an Italian, I've been struggling for years when I was in my own country to have a common European response to a challenge that was seen in the previous years only as a national one. But finally, we got, as Europeans in the European Union, to a common approach that is based on partnership and cooperation with countries of origin and transit, work to dismantle the criminal organizations, saving lives at sea and in the desert. That is the main place where people are dying in our route. Investing in local development of communities from where the flows start. Protecting people's lives, human rights, respect for the dignity of human beings, whoever they are, wherever they are, and whatever background they have. This is the European way. We struggled a lot to get there, yes, indeed. Is it still sometimes controversial within the European public scene? Yes, it is. But this is the common policy we're putting in place. And this is starting to get us some results. We think there is no way in which you can feed the illusion that migration can be stopped. Migration can be managed and has to be managed. And between the illusion of stopping flow of people with walls and saying that everybody can come, there is a reasonable, sensible, respectful manner to manage rationally. And this is our way. This is the European way. And this is, by the way that the international community agreed in New York when we decided together, all together, to establish global compacts for refugees and migration. And we are committed to that. Partnership with the IOM, UNHCR, UN system, and a special focus to the respect of human rights of people. The history of Europe is also such that, we tend to be quite sensitive when it comes to walls. And the symbolism of that is strong. We tend to celebrate when walls come down. And we are quite skeptical, to say so, when it comes to the idea that walls can stop people or things. They empower smugglers, normally. And they close you in an encircled area. Maybe that's because Europe has always been a continent of emigration. How many Italians you know that have key roles here in the United States? I guess the mayor of the city of the president, and not only the current one, also a few others, from Giuliani to others. America has always been great because it has been made up of many people coming from different places. Europe doesn't have that tradition, but we know what it means to move around because you're going out of a place because of war or because you're simply looking for a better place. So again, this doesn't mean that open borders, everybody can come, not at all, but it means that there is a rational, humane way of managing this. And by the way, sorry I've been long, but that's quite an issue.
It's an important answer. Yeah.
I don't know for America, but I guess for sure for Europe, if we were to imagine that tomorrow all migrants disappear from our countries, our economies would collapse immediately. So the cost on no migration for our economies and not only for our societies would be big. Again, this doesn't mean it doesn't have to be managed. It has to be managed in a sustainable manner. But I guess we have a different approach. I raise this not to say you're wrong, to say we're doing it in a different manner.
Thank you for that. And turning to the ambassador, if you can introduce yourself. Also, since you were speaking of Italian Americans or Italians, he's sitting next to our prominent board member, Franco Nuschese. The two most dynamic places in Washington are the Atlantic Council and Cafe Milano. So Mr.
Best
Ambassador.
food indeed, actually.
You have a strong competition there.
Now, on behalf of the government of Azerbaijan, I'm happy to endorse the Cafe Noir. It's a great place. I'm Ambassador of Azerbaijan. Good to see you, Madam High Commissioner. I know you just met with President Aliyev in Brussels. It was a successful visit. When you spoke about common priorities, you did not mention energy security. I wanted to ask you whether during your meetings in Washington you mentioned the Southern Corridor and related issues, Southern Gas Corridor. And also, I'm very happy to hear that you said that your strong statement that borders should not be changed by force. I hope it equally applies to the borders of my country, the Republic of Azerbaijan. Thank you.
And I'll add North Stream to your question as well.
The issue of energy security, which is a very relevant issue for Europe, diversification of our sources and routes are part of our security strategy, was not central to in my talks here. This doesn't mean that it will not be, and I had an excellent opportunity on Monday meeting with your president to restate our strong support to the South Gas Corridor, and that will continue to be the case. By the way, I think that you're hosting in the coming week the meeting where last year I was present together with my interlocutor here in the United States to show our common support to the project. On the European side, this is going to continue.
Thank you. Please, right here.
Hi, my name is Kira Kostretin. I'm from the Albanian service of Voice of America. So I'll bring you back to your region now. I have a question about the justice reform, the judiciary reform in Albania. The EU and the United States have been invested really heavily in having this reform approved in the country. But already there have been concerns expressed by both representatives about issues with implementing the reform, or sort of some efforts to deter the reform. Are you concerned about this, and how do you see the future of implementation? And if possible, you talked about a plate full of opportunities between the US and the EU to work together on international issues. With US adopting a stand of America first and this full plate, will the Balkans get the short shrift? And you know how important the cooperation, transatlantic cooperation has been for the region. Thank you. Grazie.
Grazie. This means I'm replying in Italian? No. No.
You can do either way.
No, grazie, ma no. Proverò con l'inglese. First, on the judicial reform in Albania, I had the honor to address the Albanian parliament just on the eve of the unanimous vote on the judicial reform, and I think that was really an historic step for the country. Obviously, for us, what is important is that now the same unity and the same determination is shown on the implementation of the reform. And I'm confident that the country can find this strength in the institutions to do that, because I know how much Albanians attach importance to this reform. And I think this is also key. Not only I think, we all think this is also key to move forward on the European Union path, European Union integration path for the country. That is an open path. You know that there's an open door. And I really hope that this will manage to be built in a sense of national unity, if I can say so. I know this is not the favorite sport in Albania, but I think that when it comes to the interests of the citizens, this is a must. On the Western Balkans, this was part of many of my conversations here in Washington, to pass the message, indeed, that for us in the European Union, the work with the Western Balkans is key, is priority. Also because sometimes we refer to this region as on its way to Europe. We don't realize it's Europe. It's the heart of Europe. And for us in the European Union, the regional cooperation and the fact that every single country moves towards its reform path and finally integration in the European Union is essential. And the message I passed here is that for that to happen, we need continuous engagement from the region, and I see that engagement with all the difficulties. I see that engagement. Continuous strong focus from the European Union side, and you can count on me personally and on the leadership in the European Union to make sure that this happens and continues to happen. And also on a clear vision in Washington to continue to be focused on the Western Balkans in a constructive manner. And I hope the message was heard.
So a woman way in the back, yes, with your hand up there. I've been trying to catch people as I saw them, and then let me pick up just.
Do you want to pick a couple of them together?
We're almost to the end of time, so let me pick up one here and one here, and we'll take two questions.
Good.
Thank you, Helga Flores Trejo, Latino Victory Project. High Representative, when Chancellor Merkel congratulated President Trump, she offered cooperation on the basis of values, democracy, rule of law, etc. Now, hearing your comments here today, I hear a more, as you put it, transactional approach. Is it fair to say that there's a difference, let's say, in degree, or what would be the balance between values, transactional approach?
And let me pick up one up here too, please. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Thank you
Who
for your leadership.
who grabs microphones
Well, it was handed to
proactively
me.
is rewarded, so not consistently.
Ms. Mogherini, thank you for your leadership on the JCPOA. I'm Darrell Kimball with the Arms Control Association. It was reassuring to hear you say that you're confident that there's a commitment to the implementation of the agreement. But as we approach some key deadlines, sanctions waiver dates, are you concerned that Congress may initiate actions that Iran might interpret to be violations of the JCPOA? In other words, sanctions that might have the same effect as some of the old nuclear-related sanctions. Are you confident that the deal will be able to navigate through this period over the next 2 or 3 months?
The most frequent question I get is if I'm concerned of something. There's plenty of reasons to be concerned. We're not living easy times and in an easy world. What I can tell you is that the European Union, which means all Europeans, and me personally with my special role on the JCPOA implementation, we will monitor carefully and in a very strict manner the implementation of the deal in its entirety from all sides. And that it is a clear European interest, shared interest, to preserve the agreement and its implementation. I don't know if, again, confidence and optimism is a category of foreign policy. I tend to believe not. But I can tell you the determination we have to make sure that the deal is preserved and fully implemented and strictly implemented by all in all parts. And on the previous question, I can tell you one thing that is 100% clear. There is no distinction, not even different shadows in the European attitude towards the United States. And I know that not because I read it somewhere, but because just exactly 1 week ago, last Friday, I was in Malta for the summit with all the heads of state and government of the European Union. That was just, including Theresa May, that was just back from Washington, and she shared with us her assessment of her visit, and we had a conversation with not only Chancellor Merkel, President Hollande, all of the 28 on our approach to the transatlantic partnership and the US. And so what I described as, I don't like the word transactional too much, but I guess that was used for the first time here. I would talk about a pragmatic approach that is based on values, our values, that we assume are common values, but again, we are in a moment when we can state what things are for ourselves. So values and European values and European interests, with a sense of friendship, but also with a clear sense of priorities when it comes to making clear that some European values and interests are not under discussion. So it's friendship, doesn't change. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. And I wouldn't be looking forward to welcoming Vice President Pence next 10 days from now in Brussels for his official visit to the EU institutions. So friendship, cooperation, on the basis of our values, on the basis of our interests, but also with clear ideas on what cannot be into doubt when it comes to some of our priorities.
Thank you. Madam High Representative, we know you have to go now to another meeting. I'd ask, as I thank you, for people to stay in their seats so that you can get to the meeting as expeditiously as possible. Let me just say a couple of things in closing. First of all, this is an important time for you to be in the United States. We hope you'll come frequently.
I'll come next month.
Great. Anytime you're here, whenever the Atlantic Council will be of assistance, we'd love to do it, but your voice is an important one. And in my lifetime, I'm not sure the transatlantic relationship has played as important a role for the future as it does, or any more important role for the future as it does now. So on behalf of the audience and everybody listening to us online and elsewhere, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you so much for this very timely trip to the United States.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain in your seats as they exit the room. Thank you very much.